I can't clap with this thing in my hand, I realize. So this is still Lent. Remember that amazing season that's gotten misnamed because nobody gets excited about the word Lent, right? But it's this wonderful season that if we follow the direction of our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, it's a season in which we fast from criticism, from condemnation. We fast from beliefs and limitation, which means we have days free of those things. And how wonderful. Can you imagine 40 full days, which is the length, approximately the length of Lent. It's a little longer than that. But 40 days without criticism or condemnation. Just feel that. Doesn't it feel good? Yeah. Where in those same days we let go of any sense of limitation. The freedom that comes with that, and at the same time we fill that inner space with love, with abundance, with joy, the things that feed our spirit, right? This is the season that we're in, and we said that during the season, and maybe throughout the year, we would focus on some of the wisdom and truth teachings that are out there in the spiritual traditions. And today we are going to talk about seeing it right. Seeing it right. When I first came to Unity, my minister was Reverend Alan Roboth, an amazing man. He was well known in the movement during his time. He was one of the icons, if you will. And one of the first things I remember hearing over and over was the phrase, see it right. And I remember he would say, before you set out to make things right, or before you set things right, see it right first. And I didn't know what he was talking about, but it sounded good, right? So to see it right means we need to shift our perspective, to shift our viewpoint in order to see things differently. And this is taught by the major spiritual traditions. I know it's taught in Hinduism, in Buddhism, Christianity, New Thought. The native traditions teach us to call upon the ancestors and the wisdom of our ancestors, and through the eyes of the ancestors to see things differently. Psychology, which is it's not a spiritual path, but it's a good parallel path, also teaches this. In the work that I did with people, a lot of the work was to shift perspective, to shift viewpoint, and be able to see situations through new eyes. Albert Einstein taught us that we cannot solve a problem at the level of the problem, that we need to shift to a greater perspective. I mean, so it's all around us. It's a wisdom teaching that's been there for the ages of human beings' place here on earth, and it is broadened as we have expanded into science, into the social sciences. You hear it everywhere. One of my favorite spiritual teachers, Francis of Assisi, he was on the planet in the 1200s, late 1100s, early 1200s. He is known for a prayer that's literally called the Prayer of St. Francis, that begins, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. However, when I was in Assisi, we would go to a church where Francis, according to the story, prayed there every day, and there was a spot along the railing, the altar and the platform area, and then there was a railing and a place to kneel by the railing. And apparently he had one spot, that his chosen spot to pray. And what they had done is they put a bronze plaque with the prayer that he prayed every day. And I so carefully copied it word for word and brought it home in my journal. And somewhere in the many moves I've made, I've lost the journal. So I don't have that prayer, and I regret it. But one line of the prayer I remember, and that's, God, grant me right perception. So he would begin each day with that as a part of his prayer. Grant me right perception. That's big. I mean, how many people in here have had the experience of a whole lot of pain and heartache because the perception they or you were holding kind of skewed things and made things a whole lot more painful than they needed to be? Anybody have that experience? Okay, look around. Yeah, so we all know what this is, this shift to a right perception, right? Oh, there we go. Ram Dass, another favorite teacher of mine, wrote, being enlightened is a process of cleaning our windshields. You know how sometimes we can be going somewhere and our windshields have all that muck and stuff on it and we can't see where we're going? Well, it's spiritually the same thing. When we allow that muck to stay there, we go cattywampus. We go in all sorts of directions that are dangerous for our spiritual health. And if you can see that little windshield in the stars, that's just proof that that is a true statement, right? It's cleaning the stuff. There's another teacher. How many people are familiar with Joel Goldsmith? Not that many. Okay. Joel Goldsmith is a teacher of spiritual teachers. There's a writer named Dr. Joseph Murphy who is considered to be one of the foremost teachers of metaphysics. He was a good friend of Ernest Holmes, who's the founder of religious science. Joel Goldsmith was Joseph Murphy's teacher. Joel Goldsmith was Castaneda's teacher. So, like, the big names kind of got their inspiration from Joel Goldsmith. And Joel's written so many books, many, many, many books. And they're all not difficult to read, but you can read a few pages and then you have to take it in and let it seep. It's not the type of thing you can skim through. Each page is so filled. Two of my favorite books of his, one is Living Between Two Worlds, and the other is Art of Meditation. But there are many, many more. And I'd like to read to you from Living Between Two Worlds today, a little bit. And so the bookmark that I put in here, I see fallen off to the side. Okay. So in this chapter, Joel starts out saying what we've just been talking about, that it's important to shift our perception to see things differently. And in there he says spiritual discernment, which is just two big words for seeing it right, seeing it through spiritual eyes. Spiritual discernment reveals that which is. In other words, when we see through the eyes of spirit, when we are guided in our spiritual vision, what we are doing is actually seeing what is. You realize that what we see, what we hear, what we feel is filtered. Everybody knows that, right? If we had a gecko in here looking at this room, the sensory image would be so different, we wouldn't recognize it. So just the fact that we're human beings and we have the sensory system that we do gives us one filter. And then when we pass it through our life experiences, our biases, our fears, our wounds, our hopes, our dreams, our preconceptions, our assumptions, by the time it goes through all of those filters, what we take as proof because we're seeing it with our own eyes and hearing it with our own ears is absolutely no proof of anything at all, right? It's just a sliver of the physical reality, and it's passed through so many filters that are our own, right? So spiritual sight, spiritual vision allows us to see what is. Joel goes on to say in this section, just as intelligence enables us to ride without fear on a train, because we really do know that the tracks don't come together in a point. Imagine if they did and we're on a train, the whole train would fall off, right? So when we see those tracks coming together, we know that's not the truth. Just because our eyes see it doesn't make it true. We know a greater truth, so we can ride on a train. Just because it is possible, because we know that there is no such thing as a horizon, even though we see a horizon, we are now able to get on a ship and sail off into the horizon without fearing that we're going to fall off the earth. How many people have seen a horizon? Okay. Doesn't it look like when you get to the end, you fall off? And that's what people believed for a long time. But our eyes see it. It's proof positive that you fall off the earth, right? We have to let go of that level of perception and go to a higher knowing to remove that limitation, that fear of falling off the earth. As our spiritual faculties are enlarged, enriched, and deepened, we will discover that every aspect of limitation begins to disappear. There is a greater and greater awareness of the fact that the five senses do not testify truthfully. We learn not to judge by appearances, but are still for a moment and let the Spirit of God bear witness to the truth. We know that's true. We know that our senses just give us a sliver and a skewed view of truth, but it's so hard for us to let go of this notion that if I see it, that's absolute truth, right? But we have to. We have to. Sometimes we see that so-and-so is being mean to me, or sometimes we see that my bank account is empty, or sometimes we see that the pain is so excruciating, I'll never feel good again, because that's the proof of my senses. We have to let go of that as truth, not to deny that we're moving through this experience, but let go of that as truth. Anytime we are confronted with appearances that we do not understand, we must stop for a moment, pause, close our eyes, and be receptive as if we are listening. Then, in place of the sick or the sinning person, we will hear that inner voice saying, "This is my beloved son," or maybe "This is my beloved daughter, in whom I am well pleased." So that's a twist, right? When we want to see beyond the appearances, when we want to be able to see through spiritual eyes, we have to stop, become still, and listen. He didn't say squint so you could see really well. He didn't say get a magnifying glass. He said close your eyes, become still, and listen. In that stillness, allow the prayer of St. Francis to bubble up. God, grant me right perception. As this is going on in my life, grant me right perception. Sometimes it feels so hard because it's not just what we think we're seeing, but it's all the feelings that bubble up with it. You know, when your stomach knots up and your heart hurts and your heart's pounding and you're scared or you're angry or you're feeling small. Those feelings are so powerful. It's sometimes the appearance is, I can't get past these feelings. Still, the task, the direction is to become still, to become quiet, and to ask for right perception, to listen for that voice that guides us to the truth. Joel goes on to say the ability to move from the world of material sense to the world of spiritual discernment is proportionate to our ability to close our eyes to appearance and to wait for the voice of God. It's very clear direction. And if we go back to all those spiritual traditions, they all teach meditation or time in the silence to allow for this ability to see things right. So it's that inner eye, that inner voice that leads us to the truth. In Buddhism, the Buddha taught 4 noble truths, and those truths were about the fact that yes, on this earth, on this plane, there is suffering, but there is also a path out of the suffering. And the Eightfold Path was his teaching on the path out of suffering. And when the Eightfold Path is listed, Buddha taught it really doesn't matter where you start, but always on the list, the very first thing is right view. And by right view, he meant right understanding, that ability to see a situation and understand it rightly through wisdom, that ability to truly see what is. It's that ability to see truth in the face of those appearances. So this is right at the center of Buddhist teaching. This was at the heart of what Buddha taught. And this is what Oprah teaches too. You know, there's an interview. How many people are familiar with Van Jones? Yeah, more than, I don't get the channel that he's on, because when I got my TV from the cable people, I said basic, and then they named something, and then I said, do you have something more basic than that? And they did. And then after they thought they had all that set up, I said, do you have anything even more basic? And they did. So basically, I have no channels almost. So, but someone sent me this clip, or the clip out of which this came. And Van Jones was beginning the show saying, you know, there's so much going on in the world. People are feeling stressed, they're feeling hopeless, they're feeling frightened. There's political unrest, there's international unrest, there's refugees, there's people running for their lives, and there's so much, and it's easy to get discouraged. And he goes, in the face of that, we need hope, we need wisdom, and we need inspiration. And so he's saying the same thing. We need to shift into a different way of seeing. so that when we do act, we can be more effective. You know, we can move through these situations from our place of power. And then he had Oprah Winfrey come on, and they had a conversation, and I will let you listen to a piece of the conversation right
now. Help me with this.
Well, let me help you. It's law. It's law. You and I talked about this. We've had long conversations about it.
There is a very loud buzzing here. It's from here. Is there any way of turning that off so people can hear? Is that better? Okay. So let's see if we can get that going again.
Help me with this.
Well, let me help you. It's law. It's law. You and I talked about this. We've had long conversations about it. What I deeply believe is not that do unto others as you would have them do unto you. What you do is already done. That moment in The Color Purple where she says, everything you ever tried to do to me. Where Whoopi says that, and Celia, everything you even tried to do to me, already done to you. So the third law of motion in physics says that what you're putting out is coming back all the time, regardless of whether you know it or acknowledge it or not. So you got to stay as a warrior of the light.
Dude, I believe it. I want to get practical to you. I want to get practical. Somebody can say, well, she can say that because she's a gazillionaire. But
the way I got to be a gazillionaire. Because this is what I have understood for a long time.
Every day, this is what I'm going to tell you about my life. You tell me how to fix it. Every day I wake up I need help. I wake up in the morning, I'm trying to be a warrior of the light. And I reach for my cell phone, and I look at it, and I just start freaking out. And I freak out the whole day. What do you do every day?
So I wake up in the morning.
What you do?
And the first thing I say is, thank you. That's my first thing. Even before I'm awake, even before my eyes are really fully open, I say, thank you. I can feel the gratitude, like, ooh, I'm still here. I'm in a body. Thank you so much. I thank you for that.
Gratitude.
And then I go through the letting the dogs out, the whole, brushing your teeth and all that stuff. And then I have either silence or prayer or something that acknowledges that I'm still here. I do not reach for that phone first. That's your problem. That's your problem. I understand, but you're in the business and you might know what's happening. You know what's happening. What am I going to respond to today?
I gotta get myself.
Let me get in it.
Well, I love what you're saying, and it's.
But you don't believe it.
No, I believe.
You don't believe it. But you think you can fight it head on. You cannot meet it head on and fight it. You have to transcend it. You have to.
Okay, so sorry about the sound quality there. I'm not sure what happened. But for those of you who couldn't hear it, the short version is, she was talking in the beginning about how we need to always see the light and look through the light. And he says, well, that's easy for you to say, you're a gazillionaire. And she said, but that's how I got to be a gazillionaire. That was the practice that brought me to this place. And then he said, well, help me out, because I set that intention of looking into the light, of seeing the light, and then I wake up in the morning and I reach for my cell phone, I look at it, and I start freaking out. Because, of course, those phones pop up the news first, right? And she said, and that's your problem. Because when I wake up in the morning, I lay there with my eyes closed and I say, thank you. And I linger in that thank you. And then she goes, well, I let the dogs out because you got to let the dogs out, right? But after she lets the dogs out, she finds some practice, whether it's silence or prayer or reading, something that focuses her being on the light, on the truth of who she is. And then she goes into her day. And she was teasing him, and she goes, but you see this stuff and you go, ah, you know. And she warned him that trying to meet it head on gets him nowhere, because he gets caught up in it, in those appearances, that you have to begin by shifting your perception, by opening yourself to seeing it right. It doesn't mean you become passive. It doesn't mean you take action. But it does mean that when you respond from that center, from that spiritual strength within you. And you are more effective, you are more powerful, and you get to be a gazillionaire, right? No, so. To see it right is to see the light, and to make it a practice to see the light. It's to see the love, and it's to see the possibilities, despite the appearances. Namaste.